Welcome to this course on creating task 1A rather B. In this first lesson, we're just going to look at getting a good start, setting up your project so that when you get through a bit further and you start adding all your tracks and adding all the parts that you need, you don't have to backtrack because you've set something up wrongly or you've had a problem in the early stages. This is quite often the case with a few of my students, is they'll whiz through all the parts, they'll get them set up, and then they miss something right at the beginning, and he goes, oh God, I've just made a whole bunch of headaches for myself. So take your time, look through the score, and make sure you get your project set up properly. So here's the first thing. Let's start by saving, and finding where we're going to save that. Once again, a lot of my students, they go through Logic, and because when you press save in Logic, it just lets you save it anywhere, they don't always know where they keep their work. And this can be a real problem later on down the line. So make sure when you save your work, you save it into your folder, hopefully your Music Tech portfolio folder. So here we are in Logic. I've started up a project, and I now come over to File, and I can just say, hey, let's save. Once you press save, it will then take me over to a folder. So here's my folder here, Task 1A rather B. And in this folder, I've got the score that Edexcel gave me, I've got some notes that I've been keeping, and then I've got my Logic file. And when you save your Logic file, it does create the folders for you, okay? And then it creates all these little bits inside, and then there it is. One thing I would say to you guys is, as you work through this project, every time you save, you might want to think about doing a save as. So in this instance here, we've got Task 1A project rather B. The next time I save it, after I finish my drums maybe, I'll call it 1.2. After I save that one, I'll call it 1.3. And remember to always open up the latest version. The reason I do this is that if one of your folders gets, or one of your files gets corrupted, it won't take you ages to kind of work out where you should be, okay? So that's the first thing. Let's just save our work. The next thing I like to do is work from the actual track. Now the song is rather B, so hopefully from iTunes or from a CD, you should now have a copy of that song. And the first thing I do is import it, just drag and drop it onto your project. And here mine is. And let me just unlock this for a sec so that message doesn't come up. Here's mine, so I've dragged it onto here and I've kind of worked out where it should be. This is a really good point because from now on, I'm going to be able to reference this track all the way through. Another thing you're going to want to do is make sure it's in time, make sure it's in sync. Let me just close a few of these extra channels and just show you what I mean. So as we go through, we're going to want to keep our track in time. So if I zoom open, you'll see I've got lots of these transients. Now a transient is just a marking point of sort of a prominent beat. And as you can see, I've got my beat 1 here, and you can kind of see that each one is really cleverly aligned with a grid point. And this is something I would say to you. So the tempo on the score for this actually says, let me bring up the score here, actually says it's 115. That's not true. I've went through this and I put it in the initial stages 115, sorry, and I came up with loads and loads of issues because actually the track isn't at 1.115. Let me open up all my tracks again. Here's my tempo marker. If you don't know where these markers are in Logic or your own program, what you normally have is global tracks. Here's my first global track, and I click on this, I should get a button here. If I right click, I should get a button here that says configure global tracks. When I click on this, I have all these things that I can put in. I like to have my tempo ready at hand, and I like to have my time signature and my key signatures ready at hand, okay? So once you've ticked these off, you should then be able to see them here. So now we've got my tempo track. What you're going to see is actually I've started my piece, and you'll want to do a lot of listening, but I've started my piece off at 116. That's the BPM. And all I did to get this marker initially, select my tempo track, make sure my playhead is in the right position, and then come up to here and input the number. So 116. And then once it gets to the verse, it very quickly changes to 121. After you've got that in place, then what you're going to want to do is set up your track. So you're going to need to move this track around until you get your transient marker in place. Now, if you look at bar 9, there's a really good transient right there. And if I zoom in using this one here, you can see that actually that is just a really nice one to put in place. So all I did then is move it around. One thing you might notice is that up here in your snapping options, you won't, if you've got it set to beats, you won't be able to move it very far. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can take it down to say ticks, or you can just turn it off. If you turn it off, it just gives you free rein to move this track wherever you want. Once you've got this track exactly placed where you want it, I would suggest locking it down, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally move this, because it's going to take you a long time to set this track up and get it exactly the way you want. So make sure you lock it down. Now in the track you have these protection buttons. How you get to these is if you right click on a track and then go down to the bottom where it says configure track header. Now from the configure track header you should have all these items here, and you can add these as much as you want, and the one that's really handy is this protect one. So if you haven't got it ticked, it'll be like that. Once you tick it, it'll be like that. And then you can protect this, and it's really important you do that so that as you move through this project you don't end up moving this track. It's really important that you keep this track in one place. Okay, the next thing I do is in the score I've got a printout of this, and I just go through marking up. I mark up things like what's the key signature. Now the key signature that I've worked out at is G sharp minor, and I've just put that up here. So I've included G sharp minor up here. The next thing is I just make sure it's all in 4/4. So if you whiz through, make sure it's all in 4/4, and that information will also be up here as well. So it keeps it all in one place. And then I just go through and just look at things that might cause me a few stumbling issues. Like for instance, what about the structure? And on my score I've got written up, okay, this is the intro, and as I go through it, as I get to bar say 19 I think it was, or 17, I say hey, this is the verse, and so on. So mark up your score, start circling things that are causing you issues so you can kind of work on that as well. Okay, the next thing, once you've marked up your score and you've worked out the structure, let me zoom in again. The next thing you want to do is actually put the structure down on your piece. And using marker tracks, move your playhead. So if I do one at the end here, just to show you how this works, move your playhead to where you want the next marker track. You press this little plus button, and then it creates this grid point. And you can double click on this. Oh, it's locked, so it gave me a little message. So unlock it, and you can double click on this, and you can say this is the outro, for instance. Press enter, and then it gives you another marker. Let me just undo that, because obviously I don't need that. And I would definitely recommend that you go through and you just make sure you work out where all the sections are, because when you get further down the line, you're going to have a lot of tracks, probably best part of 20, maybe 25 tracks, maybe a few less than that. But you're going to have a lot of tracks, and it gets to be quite difficult to manage. So one way in which you can manage this a lot easier is just to put these in place, okay, to work out the sections and how I've colorized them. If you've got this little drop down panel here, and just come over to the color panel with one of these selected and just choose the color you want. Nice and easy. Helps you keep organized. So straight away I've worked out my time, and I've worked out the only change there is. I've worked out the structure to make sure I know what part of it is, and this is also good so when you come to repeating parts you know exactly where you can drop them in as well. I've worked out that the time signature is 4/4 all the way through, and that the key is G sharp minor. So we've got a lot of really good information. I've also synchronized my reference track to the grid to make sure when I'm putting in my parts, everything goes in time. And if I want to quickly reference, I can just press solo, and then I can press mute. And I've got a quick reference to the actual track to make sure I'm on the right guideline. Now, one thing to remember about this track is it ends at approximately 2 minutes 58, okay, is when you start the fade out. You don't need to realize this last section. One thing I like to do is have the time ruler showing as well. If you want the time ruler rather than just the bars and beats ruler here, you can come to where it says view, and then you can say add secondary ruler, and it will give you the time in seconds. So hours, minutes and seconds, okay? So where this ends, hopefully that should be around 2 minutes. So if we zoom in, 2 minutes 58 I believe. There you go. 2 minutes 57 is when it starts to end. You do not need to put any more than that in, but it does need to finish quite positively and not just very abruptly, okay? So make sure you find the best solution to that end. Now, I think I've said all I need to do about setting this project up. Take your time, make sure you get it all the way you want so that when you start working on this track, you can just whiz through it and it'll be fantastic. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to start putting our first track down, which is the drum part.